Welcome back to the CyberVault. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Denise Hayman. Denise is the CEO of Sales Velocity and very much a seasoned go-to-market leader with an incredible track record scaling early-stage startup within cybersecurity and other major players. Today, we're going to be diving into the essentials of go-to-market strategy, what founders get wrong, what frameworks actually work, and how to hire the right people to drive the real traction. Denise, a pleasure to have you on today. Why don't you maybe kickstart and give us a little bit more of an intro to yourself?
Oh, thank you, Katie. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. As you said, I've spent a long time, over 25 years actually, in the CRO and head of sales seat for almost exclusively security startup and then mid-sized growth software companies. And what I've done is a mix of transforming go-to-market, helping startups really kind of get their first footing, helping them reignite installed growth, and then ultimately really driving to some sort of an exit, which is what every startup seems to want. I've been lucky enough to be a part of 9 successful acquisitions. So along with my team, I'm very big on making my team be a part of every transformation that I am. I am not talking well today.
It's all right. It's all part of the fun. but no, ultimately, you've just demonstrated there, right? 9 exits. I don't think there's many people that can put that on their book, and it's really, really impressive. And you've worked at some really incredible early stage startups, helped them grow through. And I think kind of the thing with go to market is arguably, yes, the strategy changes dependent on the business and what you're targeting. But there is some foundations that I suppose every business really should at least use to start working and building from. I mean, if we were to start with early stage startups, what and they're like, in that position where they're looking at go to market, this is now priority. What are the first things that you would say or offer advice to say, look, these are the key criteria you need to look at considering before you even start going out there and doing all the crazy exciting stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. What I find when I'm engaged with early stage founders and startups is that one of the things is they get really excited about their products, right? They've developed it, they've spent years thinking about it in some cases, or maybe solving it in their previous roles and then decided to go out and make it happen. But they forget that it isn't just about the product. It is absolutely about what is the thing that you are solving for, what's the pain that you're solving for. And I'm kind of a broken record on this because sure, you can't have a company without the product, but if you don't have a targeted market, your ICP, right, as we talk about, making sure you're not trying to go after too many types of customers at once, like really getting successful before you expand, and then ensuring that your messaging matches the pain that they will solve, not just spitting out product features to them, right? This is the thing that I find over and over and over again. And it's a delicate balance, right? The role that I'm in now, being on my own in an advisory role, is you need to get excited along with them, right? And those are the only companies that I work with, are those that I can get excited about what the product offering is, but really moving them over into understanding very specifically what is it you're solving for your customers. And even just having the first couple of customers doesn't necessarily tell you that if you're not learning from them and then expanding from that.
Yeah, I think what you've just highlighted there is it's so important that it's I think it's evolving as well. You can't kind of there's no one size fits all. It's kind of like, oh, it might work here, but you need to make sure you're getting that feedback and that back and forth by the sounds of it.
Right, absolutely. And even sometimes what worked last quarter is not going to work this quarter,
Yeah.
right? The markets change or your product shifts or you start developing new relationships or new partners, and all of a sudden you learn more, and you need to make sure that there's that feedback loop to ensure that it gets back into your go-to-market strategy,
Yeah.
right? I find a lot of founders are like, I actually had this conversation recently with one founder. He was like, Denise, I've been doing this for a couple months. I know now what the issues are. Like, great. What are they? right? How are you cataloging them? How are you feeding it back into your messaging? How are you feeding it back into your product? How are you making sure that everything is lined up? Like alignment is absolutely where it's at, especially early stage. And you need to do those cycles really quickly, right? You
Yeah,
don't have to do them, right? Most in security, one of the things also that's really interesting is that it's a very crowded market, right? Everyone sounds the same. So you need to differentiate yourselves by really honing in from a personalization and custom perspective to
yeah,
really be seen as like, oh, they really get me, right?
yeah.
They understand what it is that is, making my job harder. So conveying that message besides just product absolutely has to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think you just touched in on something there that I personally think is really important in that it's almost like the personal branding side of a business, and it's kind of creating a human behind the product and realizing that yes, okay, the product's solving problems, but the people creating this product really understand where I'm coming from and kind of why this problem's important to solve.
Mhm.
Because I think it's easy to just go in and be like, oh the product, it solved X, Y, and Z's problems and it's doing all of this and all of that. And it's like, yeah, but maybe they don't have the same problems I've got, kind of thing, and maybe it's different. And when you have that personal factor, it definitely helps, I suppose, drive that a little bit.
Does, right? And this is, I think, another key point in that what is the founder's role in making that happen?
Yeah.
Either in social media, LinkedIn, or even in the customer face to face. I find a lot of them, they kind of do the whole like that, oh, hang on, that's sales. I don't want to do that. But the role I think of the founder is to create that credibility,
Yeah.
right? What are they? Just what you just said, right? What are they about? Why does it matter? How did they even come to this idea to create this product? And what is it that what is their point of view,
Yeah.
right? To me, what they should be posting about is their point of view about either the industry or the problem they're solving, using case studies, using use cases, right? Being amplifying the brand voice as opposed to necessarily feeling like you're out, direct messaging people for first meeting. That's not what it's about, right? I mean, certainly some of that needs to happen, but I think it's really more about the reader understanding that you get me, but just
Yeah.
what you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, do you think you kind of touched base on something a little bit earlier, but are there any common mistakes that you think kind of that you really see, and from whether it's the businesses that you've kind of helped scale or from the businesses that you're advising, where you would say this is like people really easily make these mistakes. They don't necessarily realize it's a mistake, especially when it comes to kind of launching go-to-market strategies.
Yeah, as we touched on before, and I can expand on it, right? The building the go to market motion instead of just the product motion, and having a vision for what is that going to look like, right? Who is your customer? How are you going to reach them? Do you want to use partnerships, ecosystem? Are you going to do direct selling? What are your models? Because that can change what the product offering can be. So having at least a thought process around that. I'm not saying that it wouldn't change, but at least kind of thinking about that early on. I think it's that. I think it is also like what kind of company do you want to create? Like what do you want to be known for? What is your, not just from a product perspective, but what's the culture you want to build within your team? Do you want it to be a product led team? Do you want it to be a sales led team? Do you want it to be customer focused? Like what are your value systems that then you apply to everything that you're developing, whether that's hiring, whether that's the type of messaging you do, whether that's what your website says. I mean, to me, I experienced that probably for the first full time when I was at Expel, where culture was a massive part of the way that they went to market, and that touched every single piece. That really taught me that lesson that in itself can be the differentiator.
Yeah, no. And I mean, kind of if we were to look at one thing I think that we've discussed and I think is really important to discuss here is hitting the right audience demographic as well, because I think kind of, you can set your kind of go to market strategy, you can get the wheels in motion, but sometimes, say for example, I know a lot of businesses that they only want to focus on enterprise accounts because it's large revenue generating, but obviously sometimes it's a case that they actually might not be the best target audience for your product. I mean, how can you assess that you are definitely hitting the right audience and you're going for the kind of, I suppose, what's going to get you to achieve the highest success at the quickest kind of rate?
It is, yes. And you're exactly right. Everyone wants, the major bank or, the largest airline or the largest manufacturer. But a lot of those, unless there's a personal relationship there, they are not going to trust you or your company until you're much further along,
Hmm.
right? So getting those wins in other ways first, I think is more important. So, making sure you've got a strategy for that. And also, a lot of times founders think it's going to be easy. I mean, enterprise selling can be a 2 or 3 year process,
Yeah.
right? And really coming to grips with the truth of that. And like, do you really want to be working on this for 3 years before you get result? I'm guessing, and all the startups that I work with have different revenue goals than that. They're not willing to wait 3 years for that first customer. So, so I think a lot of it really goes back to the understanding and reiterating internally what that pain is that you're solving. Again, broken record, but what is the pain you're solving? And then validating it with the people that you're talking to.
Hmm.
Um, Sometimes that can be, especially founders' early days, they'll have, people in their network that they, are willing to take it on and, sort of the design partners, if you will, early on. To me, the real where the rubber meets the road is really where you get out beyond those first founder deals and you're starting to experience people that you don't know who are experiencing your product and your company in a different way. And then have you set up the ability for people to really be truthful with you, right?
Hmm.
Or, you can't be defensive. You need to listen to the truth and really kind of decide. I mean, not every truth is going to be something you need to follow, right? But really decide, right? This is one we need to take on. It meets our values, it meets our culture, it meets our pain that we're trying to resolve, or this one we're going to throw away and see if it keeps coming back.
Yeah.
Especially that, I'd say the first 25 to 30 customers, making sure there's a weekly session for you to, kind of look at the whole week and say, what did we learn from this week?
Yeah. And I think that's something that you literally touched on from the start as well. And kind of, it really reiterates the importance of that back and forth. I suppose if you were to look at, say, a product from an R&D perspective, you would always continuously be like, oh, how can we improve it? How can we make sure it's, we're offering the best product on the market? I suppose that attitude probably also needs to be applied from the sales perspective. How can we make sure that we're improving our sales process, that we're improving the way that we target our customers and do our outreach and connect with people and offer that service? It's arguably that's, if not equally as important, it's definitely very important to have that attitude towards your go-to-market strategy, I imagine.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because otherwise, what happens is you get recency bias, right? You get whatever the last call was that you were on, or whatever the last feedback that you got is what becomes real, as opposed to really looking at the patterns.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I mean, you sort of touched on this just now, but I think there's two other considerations here in terms of mistakes that I see. One is hiring salespeople thinking that that's going to be your scaling mechanism. So, to me, the pipeline needs to come first. First of all, the ICP needs to come first. The understanding the pain, needs to come second, and really getting clean on that. And then understanding your go-to-market pipeline strategy, because it is a strategy. It is not something that salespeople come in to build pipeline. Sure, they'll have relationships or people that they can bring along, and they'll, go out and prospect if they're great salespeople. But you don't want to, just be in the beginning stages and then hire 20 people with no pipeline. What happens is you'll see turnover very, very quickly. So I like to do it in chunks, right? Where you look at how's the pipeline growing, what's the opportunity engagement, and then building from there once you're expanding from there. So that's one thing that I see companies thinking salespeople come in to create pipeline. No, marketing creates pipeline.
Yeah.
And then the second one is hiring the wrong head of sales.
Yeah.
So and I'm sure you in your business you see this all the time, right? And also at the right and or wrong time, right?
Yeah.
So 0 to 1 million is founder led sales. When you get let's say 1 million to 5 million, I'm talking U.S. dollars. That's more of sort of player coach, right? It might be a small team. Let's say it's 3 or 4 people. You need somebody that can be in the field, but also or on the phones, negotiating, in the deals. And then when you get to the 5 to 20, you need someone who can be building teams and building processes and starting to figure out that those patterns and that predictability. And the thing that I see founders doing is they go for the big company that so and so has worked at before.
Yeah.
And my day, there's a lot of big, somebody who's worked at CrowdStrike, for example, all of a sudden, even though they were a regional manager, maybe they don't have any of these skills. I'm a huge believer that you need to dive into the skills, and the traits and behaviors and everything else that goes along with that. But just because they worked at that big company where there was a name brand that was creating those opportunities for them doesn't mean that they can create that at your company, right?
Yeah.
They're used to having an infrastructure. They're used to having pipeline ready. They're used to having channel partners. They're used to getting phone calls back from people that know the brand. It's a totally different game at an early stage startup.
Yeah, for sure. And why don't we dive into that a little bit more, actually? Because I think, in my opinion, and I think kind of probably a lot of people's opinion, one of the biggest things that we will always say to startups is it can be detrimental if you make the wrong sales leader hire, because you can build a really great individual contributor team to get you to that first 5 to 10 mil. But if you bring in the wrong leader, you have the potential to lose that team. You have the potential to lose the reputation you've been building. It's absolutely critical to get the synergy there. And you mentioned that obviously there's other things. I think people often look at the company name, which arguably most of the time is probably the least relevant part of what qualifies an individual. What would you kind of set as things that you would say, okay, if this was my business, or when you're advising businesses, this is what I would be looking for. This is how I would identify and qualify someone to assess whether they're the right head of sales or sales leader to kind of help me scale my business.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, I'm gonna be a broken record. A lot of it depends on, what is your go-to-market strategy, right? Are you doing small business? Are you doing mid-size? Are you selling to, heads of security? Are you selling to CIOs? Who are you selling to? And a lot of times, because it's easier, right? The hiring manager will look at and say, well, they have experience in this industry,
Yeah.
right? So sure, can that be important? But just because you've sold, one type of security is not a disclaimer for either being able to or not being able to sell a different kind of security. It's kind of all the same. It's being able to uncover, doing discovery. Like, I'm a huge believer in massive discovery and making sure that that all lines up. But that all has to go back to then, okay, what's your ICP? Who are you targeting? What's your sales cycle look like? And what has this person done before to execute on that kind of strategy? And again, it almost doesn't matter which kind of security it is or which kind of software it is, as long as they can execute that kind of, I don't know, playbook, if you will, to be able to keep a team motivated. And then it's things like, what is your value system as a company, right? Do you care about collaboration? Do you care about do you care about customer interaction, or is winning the only thing that you care about? And you want to hire somebody who shares those same attitudes and values as you do. And I have you and I chatted about this a little bit before. And I always feel like I have to do my triangle. It's back from my Sandler days of training. But to me, it starts with attitude, right? Hiring for attitude, and then you look at behaviors and say, okay, what are the right behaviors that we're expecting from this role, whichever role it is, and then what are the skills that we need? Again, do we need someone who can motivate a team around selling to enterprise? Do we need someone who has experience negotiating OEM deals? Do we really want to go channel first? So they need to be really channel friendly. What are those skills that we need?
Yeah.
So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? There's no one size fits all, especially when you're looking at people have, and I suppose it is product dependent. It's dependent on the audience that you really want to be targeting, but every strategy is gonna look different. But
Right.
ultimately, there are definitely key things that you need to be assessing when you look at a leader. And I think one of the biggest pitfalls that a lot of companies that I work with fall into is they look at company names, which definitely holds value to a certain extent for sure, but that's never really the definer. Sometimes it's, people that have been in the companies that aren't as well known are actually some of the best salespeople out there, especially if they've performed well in that. Because if you don't have the company name behind you, there's a different kettle of fish to be able to drive revenue when people don't know who you are when you're picking up the phone.
Exactly. And I think it also is dependent on like what is it that the company needs right now,
Yeah.
right? Are we going after our first case studies, our first new logos? Are we pivoting, right? Have we already chosen that, our original ICP was different and now we're pivoting? So you need someone who has skill to manage through those cycles that you're in.
Yeah, definitely. And so for anybody that's been listening to this episode, obviously there's so many different takeaways, and arguably this is a topic we could probably talk all day on because there's just so many different things to consider. And but if somebody's kind of in that early stages, this is the time where they're really starting to assess their go-to-market strategy, whether for the first time or maybe they're reevaluating kind of what they've been doing. What would you say, okay, these are like the non-negotiables for the framework that you should be doing? These are the foundations that no matter what position you're in, if you're looking at that go-to-market strategy right now, this is my advice to you. Go away and do A, B, and C first.
Understand the pain that you're solving, understand your ICP, understand what matters to your ICP, and then map your strategy to those two key components. I mean,
Awesome.
sounds simple. I know it sounds simple, right? But it is sometimes hard to execute on because egos get in the way or, emotion gets in the way, right? Just stripping it down to that is what's most important.
No, definitely. And I think it's literally like you said there, in the sense that it sounds easy. It's not easy. Sometimes you really have to be able to take on feedback that you don't necessarily. It's not always stroking the ego. It does quite the opposite. But constructive feedback is what can build success. And I think all those different things that you've mentioned there are definitely valuable. And obviously, I think a lot of people in startups are in the position where maybe they could really use basically what you're doing at the moment and saying, actually, I could do with a seasoned go-to-market leader that's helping kind of give us some advisory work. I mean, how can people reach out to Denise? How can people get in touch and just say, hey, I like what you had to say here. I think there's clearly some synergy. Can you give us a little bit of a helping hand?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for letting me do my little commercial. My company, again, after 25 years of doing go to market, I went out on my own earlier this year. And my company is called Sales Velocity. And so I salesvelocity.io or Denise at Sales Velocity, just like it sounds, or also on LinkedIn, Denise Hayman. I have some earlier stage programs that I do where I do a monthly advisory or I do workshops. Like I do a what I call a sales scrum workshop, which is really understanding ICP and what characteristics are important. I also do scaling workshops. I do competitive workshops, that kind of thing that really kind of brings the team together around a single clarity of idea or clarity of value system. But I do a lot of the like, let's just do some strategic advisory and let me be a sounding board for you, where we speak a couple times a month and just kind of make sure that strategy stays on course.
No, that's great. And I think it's always good to sometimes have somebody who's fighting in your corner, and the sounding board piece. I don't think people realize how valuable that is to have, especially in the startup world where you can feel like you're hitting your head against a brick wall. So it's always great. Well, Denise, honestly, thank you so much for being on today. I think, some really powerful insights, some key takeaways that people can use. For anyone building an early stage cyber, this is the kind of strategic guidance that can really change the growth trajectory of the business. So, to our listeners, as always, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to share the episode with any security peers, founders, executives who are building in the space. Get connected with us on LinkedIn, obviously get connected with Denise, but that's it for today. So thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time for more conversations that are shaping cyber.